Today I'm going to show you how to turn a wild mango bowl. I started out by dimensioning my piece of wild mango into 4 160mm squares. I then used my 500mm handsaw to cut out the wild mango. It was rather difficult cutting down a length of wood in order to get it to the right width. A bandsaw would have been a massive help, but at the moment I don't have the room to have a bandsaw. Cutting across the grain of the wood was much easier, and it only took a few minutes. I then started to glue the bowl blank up. I used Gorilla Wood glue and applied a liberal amount to the surface of the first piece of wood, and added glue to the second and third piece before adding F-clamps and wiping all the excess glue away. Then I used my calipers to mark the largest circle I could fit onto the wood, which was a 160mm diameter circle. I marked the centre of the wood as well to make aligning the faceplate sacrificial piece of wood easier. I then glued the faceplate section off camera. After, I cut off the corners of the blank in order to create an octagonal blank, which is so much easier to turn. If you have any ideas what to do with all of these corners, please comment below. I used my tenon saw to remove these corners. If you want to see the unboxing of this saw, I will link it up at the top. I then screwed the 75mm diameter faceplate to the blank and mounted it on the lathe. I then started the process of turning this blank from octagonal to round, which took around half an hour. I primarily used a round scraper to do this, although I will be investing in a bowl gouge and a sufficient sharpening system soon. Whilst I'm shaping the outside of this bowl profile, I wanted to tell you about my Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest and website. So as you know, I have all of those 4 social media platforms, so if you want to have a look at any of those, please check the link in the description. I'd really appreciate if you would take a look at the Instagram especially, because when I reach 1,000 followers, I'm going to be doing a live stream there, which will be about an hour long, so that would be the perfect opportunity to ask any questions and get to see another workshop tour and some additions to the workshop. I then sanded with 180 grit and then 400 grit to create a super smooth surface on which to apply finish. I applied 1 coat of my handmade scented wax finish to the bowl before buffing it off. I then moved on to turning the inside of the bowl. On this occasion, I did not drill a hole to help start the hollowing process, but it was fine without it. I brought the tool rest up just above the centre line and used my round scraper to remove all of the material. One thing I found to be a problem when using my large round scraper was that I couldn't swing the tool across the surface of the bowl. As a solution to this, I unscrewed the back plate of the lathe and took the tool rest away, which was much easier. I then put the back plate back on and continued hollowing with my big and more robust round scraper, which has a much thicker section of metal. It took around an hour to hollow out the bowl, which I was fairly happy with. Given I had already turned quite a few bowls now, I wanted to have a go at making the walls thinner, because a bowl looks much better with thinner walls as it creates a much nicer aesthetic to it. When I was making this bowl, I had to check the depth to make sure I didn't go too deep. One way that I found to be really useful to do this is by using a steel rule and holding that right to the back surface of the bowl, and then using another ruler against the tool rest to create the right depth, and that allows me to check every so often that I'm getting to the right depth of the bowl. For this bowl it was quite simple to do, but if you're creating a more difficult sort of shape to the bowl, then I would suggest you properly check it each time so that you don't go through the end of the bowl and end up with a funnel. Again, I sanded the bowl with 180 grit and followed this up with 400 grit. 400 grit is a really good grit to use because it creates such a nice surface on the bowl. I then applied some food safe finish to the inside of the bowl and then used a clean cloth to buff it off. After that, I applied a second coat of my handmade wax finish to the outside of the bowl. There will be a video coming on this in about a week or two's time, which will explain all about how I make this finish. I put the lathe on its highest speed and applied gentle pressure to allow the wax to melt onto the bowl. The wax melts surprisingly well and does not get used up quickly, as you would suspect. I then used a clean bit of kitchen roll and applied pressure to the bowl to allow the wax to fill the more porous sections of the wood. This also helps to remove excess wax left on the surface. I then buffed it off again with a clean cloth for an ultra smooth finish. After this, I used my tenon saw to cut the bowl free from the faceplate sacrificial piece of wood. I found putting the bowl into my engineer's vise to be much easier than trying to cut it on the lathe. I then used my piece of fake marble chipboard with a piece of sandpaper taped to the bottom of it to help sand the bowl's surface in order to make it flat and smooth. I also used my Bosch detail sander to help remove some of the high spots on the bottom of the bowl. Lastly, I applied a coat of food safe finish to the bottom of the bowl. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you've learnt something or at least enjoyed the video.